What's your first memory? You were never really sure if it was putting on headphones and hearing the beginning of Chicka Chicka Boom Boom and hearing the jungle on the cassette tape and just having your mind blown. Or if it was looking up at your dad who had just made you soup that you didn't like and he threw it because he was just a tired dad, but seeing the splat on the wall of the red soup. But life always seemed to be that way, didn't it? Unsure if your narrative was even right. Over and over and over. That's not what happened. That shouldn't make you flip out. That's not okay. You should have known. By the time you went to public school in first grade, you were already screened and labeled ODD and ADD. You grabbed pushpins off the walls in the school so that you could give yourself a paper cut and go to the nurse and tell you didn't feel good and hopefully you could go home. Because every single kid seemed to have an idea of what was going on except for you. Every single kid seemed to agree that the teacher was in charge except for you. You always felt uncomfortable. You always felt sick. And your mother said it was allergies. Next thing you know, they're taking your tonsils out of your throat. And no one thinks it's funny when you make jokes, waking up after surgery, even though that's what always happened in the movies. You thought it was normal for your grandmother to be shaking her fist saying, "One of these days," and that was a funny joke. And when you did that at school, you were told you were threatening people. Why would your grandma threaten you? You only say that to people you don't like, that you want to hit. You always seem to be a problem. All the kids seemed to decide when you weren't there that they didn't like you. And you wondered if maybe it was the week in third grade you were sick and missed Japan week. Maybe they all decided then, she's no good. She can't play with us. You can't sit with us. On to middle school. Your classmate dies, and everyone knew she had cancer except for you. The only kid you thought was your friend also had cancer, and she didn't tell you either. You decide you're not going to have friends. One girl pushes through and forces you to be her friend. Then 2 years later tells you you're abusive and ghosts you and turns the entire grade against you because you don't know how to have friends. You don't know what boundaries are. You never had friends, and you didn't even want her to begin with. You told her to leave, and she didn't. But over and over, it was your fault. You should have known. You should have known. So you dedicate yourself to ending, and no one lets you. Hospital, hospital, hospital. They ask you, how many times have you been hospitalized? And you say more than 10, because you're not really sure. But you have an inkling you might be over 20. There's nothing you're worse at than dying. Almost like your body's always fighting to survive. Always in fight or flight mode. And even when you took 3 months worth, you didn't even need charcoal. And you start looking at God like, why? If you have some plan, do it. Because I'm just waiting here alone. And apparently the only one who's ever going to understand me is Jesus. And he knows my heart. And he knows I'm not a dick. But maybe it's better to be someone else. No one liked you anyway. So you sit in front of your computer and you decide, I got one shot. I'm going to remake myself or I'm going to end myself. And you leave it up to Facebook. Facebook says reinvent yourself. So you do. And you make someone you'd like. Maybe that big brother you always imagined you wanted. Because it's not like you could be a mom anyway. You can't even have a friend. How are you supposed to raise a kid? What happens when they have a fight with their friend? What the fuck are you supposed to say? Oh, I don't have much experience, but I'm gonna go watch some videos. Play with puppets. It's not like anyone else is talking to you. Why would they talk to you? But they say you give good advice. Because you're always, observing. You've picked up a lot of information over the years. Because back when everyone was playing with their friends, you were on 60 milligrams of Adderall a day. And not because you were abusing it, but that's just what they did in the early 2000s. To kids they couldn't control. So fast forward, you find children, and you love them like your own, your best friend's kids. But she's not great at being a mom. And puts you in a position where you have to call CPS. And years later, after you're written out of their lives, you find out they were grateful. That it was for the best. And they're happy you did that, and they went through the effort of reaching out to you. And suddenly you have closure. And you feel ready to have kids. So you decide to become an expert on yourself. Because that's the only way you're going to be able to help someone who's kind of like you, right? And yeah, you've made some friends over the years. Never longer than 3 years at a time, but you don't regret anybody you met. And you wonder, maybe some people are just too much for people. And you look into your kids' eyes when you finally have them. And you know, it was never you. It was everything that happened to you along the way. And you never had a chance. But that doesn't mean it's too late. You find out about PDA, a profile of autism. You find out your meltdowns were meltdowns. And your threshold is really small. And you actually have so much PTSD that your psychiatrist looks you in the eye and says, are you sure your quality of life is that high? Because it sounds like you're living with torture every day. And nothing ever felt more validating. You said most people who clicked the other boxes you clicked would rate their life around a 2 or 3 out of 10. But you gave yourself a 6. And you wonder what your standards have been this whole time. You wonder. All those years you ran away. All those years your brain got so overstimulated you fainted. All those years you sat alone, disabled. And the other kids could smell it on you. But you didn't know. Because you were always told you weren't trying. You were always told to just try harder. You were always told you weren't tired. You were always told that shouldn't bother you. All those things they did. To you. All the times they left you out. It was fucked up. And your life was torture. But it's still 6 out of 10. Because now you have so many tools. And you have a beautiful son. And you're doing great. And no one who's met that kid doesn't like him. And he's a toddler. It's supposed to be the hardest. And you have a toddler and a teenager. Because that kid you rescued, who reached back out, she chose you to live with. And that's an honor that you earned. Because you're likable. Because you're lovable. Because you're worth keeping around. And when they didn't let you die, it's because they knew that. Even if they were the ones that made you feel like you didn't. You matter. You do.